Hey, John, David Leonhardt of the New York Times, as I like to say, pulled a Meacham this morning, and I read the following. In the 4 months between Franklin Roosevelt's election and his 1933 inauguration, much of the world descended into chaos. Adolf Hitler took power in Germany, and the Reichstag, the parliament building, burned. Japan quit the League of Nations. In the U.S., hundreds of banks shut down. Lynchings surged in the South. The country, numb and nearly broken, anxiously awaited deliverance, as David Kennedy wrote in his Pulitzer Prize-winning History of the Era. John, beyond telling your friend David to skate his lane, this is usually your role on this broadcast and the others on this network, to tell us, to reassure us, to remind us only that things have been worse in the past. Is that still your view?
Well, not that necessarily they've been worse, but that they've been bad, and we've come through it. And we've come through it because just enough of us were devoted to this notion that, in fact, we are stronger together as a whole, as opposed to seeing politics as this perpetual clash of interests. You know, Franklin Roosevelt, the night he took the oath on the east front of the Capitol, he went back to the White House, and like a good Episcopalian, he was having a glass of whiskey and going to bed. And one of the brain trusters came to him and said, "Mr. President, if you succeed in solving the Depression, you'll go down as our greatest president. But if you fail, you'll go down as our worst." And FDR looked at him and said, "If I fail, I'll go down as our last." I don't feel that level of existential crisis for President-elect Biden. I think that the reaction is a good sign in terms of the horror that the country seems to be addressing this moment. But here's the thing, with all respect to my lane, which I love, to some extent, the more important question tonight and in the coming season is less about how history will view what's happened this week and more about the unfolding story of what do people who decided to make their peace with Donald Trump, not once but twice in 2 national elections, millions upon millions of people, what do they do now? Are we so desensitized to genuinely transformative public events that somehow or another, in the span of a couple of days, couple of weeks, this is going to be, well, maybe the liberals were exaggerating, or you can just see how sort of that part of the political swamp and forest will try to change the perception of this. But this was a fundamental reality. And if the country does not begin again to see that politics is about the mediation of differences and the resolution of problems for a given period of time, and not a Sherman-esque arena for total constant warfare, then this is just a chapter in an unfolding story. It's not the last chapter. And I think that's what all of us as citizens, and not as journalists, not as historians, as citizens, we have to think about, is do we want to live in a world where politics is so consuming and so divisive and so ultimately depleting that it keeps us from addressing things like, oh, I don't know, a global pandemic that killed 4,000 people today in America. This isn't, this is not an academic conversation. This isn't something you're doing to fill your broadcast. We are facing a deadly virus, a rise in political violence. There are people who are suffering who, like the Great Depression, are seeing their futures slip away, the inability to provide for their families. This isn't paintball. This isn't pro wrestling. This isn't fundraising texts. These are people who are breaking into the Capitol with guns, killing a police officer, and distracting the Republic from addressing fundamental questions about the health, safety, and security of millions of people.
John, thank you for that. Thank you for setting our thinking right as we say farewell to what was pretty awful week.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.